Just 1 minute to tell you how the ACS Foundation is a non-benefit institution. We make easier for the society all the benefits from ACS belong in 80 countries. Here we are in this Accessible Tourism Congress of Accessibility and Heritage, which is the topic of this table. Our foundation, since 2002, has been collaborating actively in terms of training and or motivation for the municipalities where there are problems for the accessibility. We have seen a lot of improvements in our regulations in terms of accessibility. We have been collaborating during years. We support the execution of accessibility. In terms of tourism, we have support all the International Congress of ONCE Foundation as this one. We have support all the Accessibility International Congress, and we have designed specific needs in terms of tourism for people with reduced mobility. But we are really satisfied because we have done things. Accessible heritage, Spanish heritage. I wish we could see my slide. It is just one, but well, I cannot see it. Well, just leave it. All the actions that we are carrying on, we do it with collaboration, private-public collaboration, through a strategic alliance or convenience. In this, when it's a private and public collaborations, in 2010, we have given accessibility value the Monastery of El Escorial. This is a building from the 15th century. It's a very important tourist visit. It's an European and humanity heritage, and is 95% accessible. In 2011, the first slide on the right, we have made accessible this building of the 12th century, which is the Royal Monastery of Las Huelgas in Burgos. And we have made them accessible for people with reduced mobility, always preserving the nature of the architecture. There's another building, the Convent of Santa Clara in Valladolid from the 1300s, with many tourist visits, and it is 100% accessible. The current visit is completely accessible as in Las Huelgas. Next slide is the Juste Monastery, where the Emperor Charles V died. The 16th August will be 100% accessible for people with reduced mobility. And to finish, the Royal Palace of Madrid with 1 million visits. And we are changing itineraries. We are working on the project for its new accessibility. Once the project will be finished, we will make an economic effort in order to make it accessible before May next year. Every year, with this strategic alliance with the national heritage, we will include 1 or 2 royal sites. I want to point out that we work in international cooperation, and our interest on the spreading of our experience, we are collaborating with the World Tourism Organization. We have a global tourism view. And I apologize for my intervention because I was just a moderator. Then I start this roundtable. First of all, Fionnuala Rogerson will intervene with the strategic planning in heritage. She is a director at the International Union of Architects in Ireland. She is part of the Architect Institute in Ireland. In 2003, she has more than 30 years experience in architect. She's teacher in Dublin in the subject Accessibility and Design for All. She has... Please, Fionnuala.
Thank you for being here so early on a Friday morning on the last day of the conference. Mostly I'm going to speak as an architect because that's what I have most experience in. But of course I recognise the importance of the three areas which mainly go to comprise accessible built heritage, which would be, of course, not only the built environment, but the importance of services and information as well. I'm going to touch on a few questions, I think, to start with, the challenges that we face when we have a project to work on that we need to make more accessible. Also, maybe just to show a few slides of some solutions. And finally, if there's time, I will talk a little bit about a case study, which is about an organisation which has tried to systematically tackle the accessibility of a portfolio of historic buildings. So to talk about the challenges, I start by showing a slide of a rock in the middle of the Atlantic, about 12 kilometres off the west coast of Ireland, which is called Skellig Vichel in Irish, or the Skelligs in English. This rock was a monastic settlement from the 6th century to about the 13th century. And monks used to go to this rock where they lived a very, very simple life. For those of you who can see the slide, you will see how wild and remote it is, how difficult the terrain is. It has become a World Heritage Site, and now the buildings have been restored, and of course many, many people from around the world want to visit them. To get there, you go in an open boat, and when you arrive, you have to climb up a very steep rock face to get to the top. It is extremely dangerous and it's extremely difficult. And this, of course, is the essence of the place. To make it more easier to access this place would lose some of that essence. Now, last year, 2 people actually died. 2 tourists fell from this rock. So there has been much discussion among conservationists and people concerned with this as to whether anybody should visit it. Should it be something that we should just allow to be seen from an interpretive centre, or should one allow people to actually visit this site to experience what it was about? And I'm just showing this as with a question mark at the end. Another question I would pose would be this next image that you see is of Wicklow Mountains National Park. Wicklow is a county south of Dublin in Ireland, which we as access consultants were commissioned with landscape architects to do an accessibility audit of. Of course, it was easy to do the buildings. We could do the surface trails and the tracks. But when it came to the mountainside, it was not so easy. How do you determine how far a person might be able to get? And while we were working on this audit, a local farmer, wanted to bring some wheelchair users to the summit of the highest mountain in the national park. But he wanted to do it using a quad bike. And that quad bike was going to pull a trailer, which was going to have people in it. And the question for the organisation responsible for the park was, can we allow this to happen because the ecosystem is so sensitive that we, even where we do walk up the mountainside, they have trails and tracks to protect the natural ecological heritage there. So again, that actually went as far as the Equality Authority to determine what was the correct solution to that. Now, in fact, if we had had some of the vehicles that we've seen out in the hall there, that would not have been necessarily a problem. People could still have experienced the wondrous experience. But personally, I'm not able to reach that point. We know about all the conservation areas, which we've seen very good examples of here in Avila, and how people have managed to deal with some of those challenging questions. I show another slide which is of a number of private buildings. One is a private house in Ireland, privately owned, but which is now open to the public. And for us, the legislation is different. If it's a public building, and the public areas must be made accessible by a deadline, 2015. In the case of private buildings, we don't have the same obligation. So for many owners and operators of these buildings, the challenge for them is to find the finance and, of course, then to prioritize. So we're struggling with trying to improve the many buildings that are not in state ownership, not run by municipalities. And then I show some very small commercial buildings in the south of England. And for those of you who can see these, the door height is about 1.5 metres going in. These are owned by small shopkeepers, and part, again, of the essence of these buildings and their unique character is the fact that they have such tiny entrances and sometimes difficult entrances. The next, and I think last two questions that I would raise is in relation to hotels and guest houses. On the right-hand side, I have a slide with a small rural guest house in a village in England, which would have been built originally as a hotel or guest house. And on the left-hand side, I show an image of, not a very good one, of the entrance steps to what is now a 5-star hotel in the city of Dublin, opposite government buildings. The difference between these two is that the first one was built originally as a hotel. The second one has been adapted very recently for use as a hotel. There, I would question the choice in terms of adaptation. There is an entrance, of course, for people who cannot use steps, but it's around the corner. Is this acceptable in this instance? So, just to look at some of the things that I feel are very important when we're considering what we should be doing. Obviously, an inclusive ethos is essential from the outside. We must take a very balanced approach. We've got to look at consultation, understanding what people need, but we also have to understand the historic place and the nature of that place. We need collaboration between everybody. And finally, I think we must have design quality. When we're dealing with a quality historic environment, it must be matched with the same quality of design in terms of any intervention. And the type of design, whether it should be contemporary or not contemporary, or whether it should be discrete or not, will depend on each individual situation. So really, for me, no two buildings will be the same, no two projects will be the same. Each requires its own unique solution. Here, I show the Danish Parliament in Copenhagen, where in fact they have retained the main entrance in use with a long flight of steps to it, but at the same time they have created two accessible entrances on either side, retaining the symmetry of the building, and they lead you to a lift inside and take you straight to the chamber. Another example in Firenze in Florence, where this palazzo, this palace, has traditionally had steps to its main entrance, again a symmetrical facade, but the access, which of course was for horses and carriages, just like, for example, the Grand Palais in Paris, goes behind those steps, allowing you to access and arrive on the level. And of course, this solution may be a solution in many situations if you have the space. The Bode Museum in Berlin, I show because of the use of technology here, which has, in fact, it may be difficult for you to understand what's happening in these images, but in fact they have two platform lifts which lift out of the steps and allow the steps, using the original fabric that was used for the step, to become a platform lift. I think where it's fallen down in this case is that it was not adequately signed, and people do not realize what is happening, so they've had to put a secondary notice to show that this is where you go if you need access up this flight of steps. For those of you that aren't familiar with these lifts, you can go online, and there's a very good example on a site called Sesame Lifts, which you can look at videos of, and particularly an institution in London called the Institute of Engineers has done a number of very successful interventions there. Here, some examples of ramps. A ramp may be permanent or temporary, just like any intervention may be either permanent or temporary. And again, that is a question for us too, as to what sort of solution is appropriate. Here, going into this building in Florence, we have a temporary ramp which oversails the historic graves which are beneath it. A permanent one, which many of you will know in Madrid. And again, a permanent one in accessing the side of the forecourts in Dublin, where you actually, the ramp has been used to create a meeting space for people, where people can actually meet and talk, so that it's more than just an access route. And then there are also very many ways of dealing with tactile guiding paths. And this is, again, a challenge for us. To what extent must we standardize the information we give as we go from country to country? And to what extent can it reflect, as in the top slide here, which is in Mantova in Italy, where they have used local stone at the crossing points? My personal opinion is it again depends on each individual solution, but that it may be appropriate to use something which is non-standard, provided it's known and can be made known, and it is used widely so that people know what is happening. The Petit Palais in Paris, which has a number of contemporary interventions which are very successful, don't necessarily follow all the guidelines and the regulations, but nonetheless are elegant solutions. And of course information, finally, which sometimes information provision falls between the design team and the service provider, and very often can be omitted. Advance information before you leave home so that you know what to expect. Of course, we know all is essential. And a proliferation of information can be very detrimental to historic environments as well too. So the care that does need to be brought to bear in determining how information is provided. Have I time to look at just a little bit? I'll quickly look at a case study which is of a university in Dublin. It's called, will it move on? No, stopped. Maybe that means I should stop. Can anybody see why the slide won't move? It's not one. Well, what I was going to talk about, if the slide had worked, was Trinity College in Dublin, which is an historic university campus with many fine 18th, here we see some of the images of it here now. It's an historic campus started in the 16th century. Many of the buildings date from the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. And they had the usual typical problems that a university of this type would have had with access to the buildings. Of note is the access routes throughout the campus, which were all made with a very rough sea-washed cobble. This is not working again. Okay. Turn it at him. Okay. So what you see on the slide is the type of buildings that the university had. The next slide. Can you put the next one on? Okay, so here you see the quadrangles that the university was built around, linked by these cobbled routes, and many temporary solutions. I don't know whether you can turn it again. Yes, you do. Many temporary solutions were used in the 80s and 90s to overcome some of the difficulties in accessing these buildings. But in 2008, it was decided to comprehensively tackle the issue. They completed an access audit of the entire campus, and a prioritised zonal implementation plan was developed in order to deal with the problem. A universal access committee was established under the Estates Committee, and they sought commitment from all the stakeholders. The priorities as to how this would be, you can move on with this. The priorities as to how this implementation plan would work were first established, and these were based on the levels of usage, the impact, the views of the representative groups, local circumstance, the cost, and finally, inexpensive works were identified as the first things to tackle. Then a matrix was developed to manage these actions, the costs, the feasibility and the impact, and timeframes. Very importantly, people responsible for all elements of the work were identified. So whether that was in the finance department, in the estates office. Actually, one thing I forgot to mention to you is the reason I use this as an example is because over 500,000 people visit this university every year. So that it's not just a tourist destination, it's also a working building or a working complex. The implementation of this plan was then put into action. They decided what were the most urgent things to do, and then they moved into the major problems, which were the changing of the cobbles, which they slowly did and lifted the cobbles throughout the entire complex, and while doing that they then introduced the level access routes. They also introduced, managed to access all the entrances. They put in induction loops, did the signage, introduced alarm systems for people, and personal emergency egress plans for those who were actually working or studying in the buildings. Is it possible to move the slides quickly so that you can see some of the... I think what I'm just going to jump towards the end of it, I suppose, to say what was necessary in order to ensure that this implementation plan to tackle such a large complex of buildings, which was not being done by a municipal authority, but was being done by a private body. The first most important thing was that there was corporate policy responsibility. So the policy was developed at the highest level within the organisation. There was then strategic planning carried out. There was operational responsibility. People were identified who would take responsibility for everything. And communicating progress with people was also very important. You had to actually ensure that everybody at every level within the university and the tourists and visitors alike knew what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. So I suppose, what would I say the learning outcomes from that particular project was the importance, first of all, of having an access strategy, the importance of doing an access audit and conservation plan in tandem so that the two specialist areas worked very closely together, that you identify those with responsibilities, you carefully prioritise, and the manner by which you prioritise is critical. You introduce timescales and budgets. The briefs and specifications for all works must incorporate universal access from the very beginning. The management and maintenance has to be thought about at the outset as well too, because to continue it in operation is essential. That it should be looked at always as a continuous process, and that there should be constant monitoring and review and reflection on the lessons learned. So that's... Thank you.
We are going to continue with José Antonio Junca Ubierna. He is a PhD civil engineer. He graduated in the Polytechnical University of Madrid. He has 35-year experience. In terms of universal accessibility, and he's general manager of a consulting company, Socitec. He's a consultant for disabled people at ONCE Foundation and ACS Foundation. He's a member of a committee for the Engineering Institute of Spain. He's author of different studies for the Prado Museum in Madrid. He's an international consultant. He has taught so many courses and conferences. He has 60 publications in this area. I would like the participants to stick to the time, because there will be a discussion afterwards. And we have started a bit late. We have had some technical problems. José Antonio? Thank you. Dear Francisco, good morning to everybody. I would also want to greet my colleagues. It's a pleasure to share this roundtable with all of you within this Accessible Tourism Congress organized by ONCE Foundation. I would like to thank the ONCE Foundation. I'm going to try to make good use of the time, and I'm going to talk about universal accessibility and historical centers, bases and good practices. As you can see, according to what I have prepared, I couldn't stick to the time, but I'll try to shorten it. I'm going to talk about some definitions on accessibility. When we create environments, we have life more human. I consider accessibility has to do with two things: rigor and respect, and also responsibility. When we work in historical centers, we have to use creativity, sensibility, history recovery, and we have to safeguard the historical and architectural value. We have to take into account the aesthetics and the quality of materials we use, and we have to try to maintain the spatial configuration and to emphasize the urban elements. I'm going to talk about some documents and some publications, as the one you can see, a study that I carried out for a disabled organization on universal accessibility. You can download it from the website of the documentary center. What are the basic aspects we have to take into account? We have to take into account a historical analysis, an architectural study. We have to identify observation points and benchmarks that allow identification. We have to take into account diagnosis on accessibility, where to analyze barriers, existing barriers, all kinds of existing barriers, taking into account demographical features and the population needs. And finally, we have to take into account accessibility improvements. We have to start from what is most important. The most important thing is people and human diversity, our different skills. We also have to account disabilities, and we have to transform the lack of ability. These are all things that we have to take into account when designing our environment. Here you can see a chart where I mention different elements that we have to take into account. So I mentioned web pages, tourist guides, pavements and paving, road safety, transport mobility, parking, tourist routes, monuments, urban furniture, sensory perception of the environment, restaurants, hotels, shops, parks, gardens, signposting, wayfinding techniques, and night lighting. Traveling is like a dream, and the first part of this dream is something that we have to take into account. It is very necessary for us in our lives. I wanted to bring people that accompany me, important people such as Vitruvius, Andrés Suárez, Italo Calvino, Gastón Bachelard, María Zambrano. So they all give definitions on tourism. Vitruvio mentions architectures and its principles, beauty, utility. Suarez says that all that counts in life is a travel that is like a great work of art. Bachelard also talks about traveling and tourism and our dreams that make us travel. Italo Calvino talks about cities that are like dreams. All we can imagine, we can dream of. But behind dreams there are also fears, wishes, and this is how we build our cities. We take into account our fears, our wishes. I recommend The Invisible Cities, a wonderful book by Italo Calvino. And finally, María Zambrano, that talks about utopias when designing cities. And we mention the different elements that we need to take into account when traveling. Each person develops its own experience when traveling. Nowadays we have different tools such as websites. Whenever we plan a trip, we use the websites. The content of the websites must be accessible, it must be diversified. If the information must be precise, correct, accurate, and reliable. We have to have tourist guides and maps that should be accessible. We have to have guides that are available to everybody. We have to have tourist maps in accessible formats that we can download from the websites. We have to have tourist guides that we can download to our mobile phones or on other devices. I'm showing you some images which I'm not describing because we don't have time. Images from Madrid, Bordeaux, and other cities that want to be accessible cities. In the tourist information offices is the place where you receive customer care, where smiling is very important. It must be a place easy to be located, and the content, the information should be accessible, the service must be efficient and professional, and this is something very important. So we have to eliminate gaps or conflicts between the areas, the spaces and environments. We have to create places where everybody lives peacefully. Here you have some examples. Mobility is something we have to take into account. Safety road, paving is something very important. We treat on it. We don't think it's so important, but it really is. Pavings are fundamental. It is important to use different kinds of pavement, and in historical areas, pavements are not the real ones. We cannot preserve irregular cobblestones. Road safety is another element to take into account. We have to eliminate gaps, conflicts between pedestrians and traffic, vehicle traffic. We have to adapt signposting in terms. You can see photos from Burgos, a city which is next to Avila. Avila, a city which was awarded the Sophia Queen Award. Here you can see image of the tram in Burgos, in Bordeaux. Here you can see the metro in Madrid, which has been made accessible. Madrid has one of the most efficient and accessible public transport networks in the world. There is still a lot to do. We cannot say that we have reached our goal, but we have already gone a long way. So it is important for you to be able to park your car if you use your own car. Here you have an example of a project we carried out a few years ago for tourist routes, pedestrian tourist routes in Madrid. We offer information on different tourist routes. We use different colors so that we can make the pedestrian find more easily the route which is most adapted to each of one. Monuments have to have this compatible accessibility and respecting people and the heritage. Here is the facade of the Great Theatre of Bordeaux. It's a very discreet and efficient solution in terms of the stairs. It doesn't alter at all. This is another case in France, the Saint Chapel of Paris. Everything has been perfectly preserved. Materials, good materials have been used. They have used tactile materials, materials with chromatic contrast. Historic buildings in cities such as Salamanca, that is another example. These are monuments that are part of the Spanish human heritage. Urban furniture is very important. We all need a bench where we can have a rest after a long route, where we can contemplate a facade. If the benches are not comfortable, you can't have a rest. We have to take into account all these aspects, the 4 fundamental aspects: accessible design, accessible location, effective maintenance. We have to take into account the environment, forms, textures, sounds, location, temperature, materials. Here is a plan of Lübeck city, or a tactile route that you can enjoy with your hands or your feet in Germany. We have to make hotels, shops, restaurants accessible. Here is an example of Parador, a hotel in Spain. I have collaborated to adapt the accessibility plans. It was a challenge because many of these venues are ancient or historical buildings. We can also mention parks and gardens that I have already mentioned. The informative signpostings always lead to Rome because Rome is the world city. But if you take one way, you can get to your destination earlier, and it can be more comfortable. We also have to take into account lighting. Night lighting is very important, so that you can really enjoy a city. So that you can enjoy the walk, the company, and the conversation. So lighting is very important. This is an example of Amiens, a city in France, where they have been awarded a good practices prize. The final thoughts. There are 6 final thoughts. Each historical center is unique and is different from all the others. We shouldn't compare. Comparisons are odious. Each city has its own specific features. First, we have to try to revive the historic centers. We have to preserve historical centers for the pedestrians. The furniture has to be adapted and has to be accessible and comfortable. We have to avoid the concept of thematic park. The informative signposting has to be effective, and night lighting has to be used so that we can enjoy our monuments and our cities. I'm going to finish with this drawing that I was given. It's a drawing of a square described by a Spanish writer who is not very well known, Javier Tomeo. He was born in Aragon in 1932 and he died in Barcelona last Saturday. This square is in the middle of the village. It has 16 trees, 16 lighting posts, 8 wooden benches. 4 of the benches are facing the sea and the other 4 are facing the mountain. Those who are sitting seeing the sea can enjoy the sea. I'm seated looking at the mountains and I'm focusing on the children, the elderly people, the sunbeams. Thank you very much.
Muy bien, pues vamos.
Thank you. We carry on with the speech of Mr. Delfín Jiménez Martín with the urban space accessibility in historical settings. Mr. Jiménez Martín is an architect by the Polytechnic University from Madrid, and he collaborates with Fundación Accesibilidad Vía Libre. Since the year 2000, he's part of the team of Urbanismo Accesibilidad SLP. Since then, he has been working on civil and consulting about accessibility. He has worked on accessibility in squares and urban spaces for private owners. He has a wide experience as expert in INOR, in quality certification and universal accessibility. He has taken part as expert at the European Commission about accessibility. He, as teacher, we can outline that he's a coordinator of the accessibility itinerary of the physical environment in the Master of Accessibility and Environment for All from the Jaén University. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. In next minutes, I would like to invite you to walk through the streets with me. Where do we walk when we visit some place? We go always through the historic center, and this kind of imaginative walk, we are going to review some ideas and suggestions that will allow us to see some key points of accessibility when we are talking about the intervention in heritage. First one of it is when we are talking about the different levels. Sometimes you couldn't see the forest because of the trees, for sure. It's because some things we have to see them at different levels. In the case of slopes, we have to study them in different scales. In a global scale, where we want to go, where it is located. Here we could think, in the past times, it was bad motivation to put the most interesting places in the most difficult places to reach. No, but many times it had defensive features, which is always present. This is another difficulty when analyzing accessibility in our environments. In a middle level approaching, we try to make easier the path to get to that environment. Well, many times it's not so easy to give a solution, a whole solution to accessibility, but many times we can make it easier through very different ways, through mechanics elements. There are 3 examples here in the images. The stairs in Toledo, or the Santa Justa station in Lisbon, or other elements, as with drums from the scratch to tackle accessibility from the very beginning, or the same but from point of views from in Castilla and Zamora, or as in Venice, there were some to finish in a closed level scale. I think about Mesa Redonda, the architect, when he said God is in details. Accessibility is all about details, really. It's a details discipline. In this closed level, details are the key point. It's little intervention as can solve many different problems. So, as result from this 3 points vision of the accessibility, we can, from the global scale, we can see the need of a necessity of the need of alternative itineraries, maybe also resting areas and benches, and also solving problems with the paving blocks. A second idea, to study the orientation as a matter of accessibility, because many times we forget about it. It's not enough to know where do we want to go, but also how do we get there. Because if we don't really know it, first thing is that we can get lost. And well, if you do it on purpose, maybe it's fascinating. But if you are not looking for being lost, then maybe it's not so funny. So maybe we can get lost through the Creta Classic, or maybe we can get lost in an Arab city or in one of our Castilian cities. At the end, it's exactly the same. We get lost. And the solution is very easy. It's just sign directional posting. Because when we are talking about sign directional posting in a city, we are thinking about the drivers. And it's not only for drivers, this signposting. This specific signposting is specific for pedestrian, and it has to be specifically designed for them. Another idea is about pavings, safe pavings. Yes, is maybe obvious. The street paving are very difficult elements to solve. But however, is this not impossible? We can solve them. There are many examples about how to include heritage and the adequate pavement. Well, as an example, in Cáceres city or here in Avila also, there is a kind of non-flying pedestrian in any material that can be well integrated in the existing pavements. It will work anyway. It doesn't matter if you put it on the one side or on the other one. And something else, there are some buildings that we can reach from many different points on the city, or maybe it comes different access, different entrance. Before we travel, we can get the information, and we can see, and we think, okay, this building is accessible. And once we are there, we are surprised. Well, maybe I was wrong, maybe I wasn't wrong, but I didn't have the adequate and the convenient information or signing, maybe it was an alternative entrance, but without the adequate signing, then I cannot find it. Another idea, we are talking about heritage. This is when we are talking about heritage, what are we talking about? What is this? Since then is heritage. I give you an example with a building that most of you would know. It is in Córdoba, Córdoba Mosque. Because, well, it's not just a mosque, because really it's a group of mosques that had been extended. Or are we talking about the cathedral? Or are we talking about the former Visigoth basilic? Many times when we are talking about heritage, it's not just one thing, it's a group of things in the same place, because there are different buildings from different times all together, and we have to have clear our goal, because many times we cannot preserve the whole thing. It is very important to make clear this aim, this goal, this objective, in order to maximize our respect for that we want to preserve, but on the other hand, also to improve how to enjoy it, because maybe we make it accessible and then we cannot enjoy it anymore because we have covered it. One more idea. When we are talking about heritage and old things, we think that it has to be like black and white things, or classic things is just like gray, but history is very colorful also. Colorful allow us to understand history and also help us to enjoy these historic places. It can help us, as you can see in the image example, for the limits of the spaces, the shapes, and to avoid wrong interpretations. Because in order to be integrated, it has to be monochromatic. Then at the end, we monochrome. Then at the end is a bit tricky. But color also allow us to frame a building, and you can see in the central image there are so many colors that we cannot even see in the same picture. We can see the limit of the pavement, and it helps us also to perceive the deepness, the depth of the buildings, of the houses. The seventh idea, we cannot pretend to, when we are working on accessibility, we have to have a global view, a kind of surgeon view. What is the difference between a detailed intervention in accessibility or a whole intervention? The difference is when about the planning, about the studying. A good example of a global response is the one from the League of Historical and Accessible Cities project, which has been coordinated from ONCE Foundation, and from the beginning many different cities have been working on it. Vigo, Trin, Luca, Avila in Spain. Well, later on they will be talking about this project. I'm not going to go in details. Well, this is Avila example, but this is about an accessible route. The whole itinerary has to be analyzed with a global view. What are the interesting monuments? What are the public buildings, hotels, restaurants within the itinerary that allow us to have a more global view? When we are talking about the need of the accessible heritage, but also when you go to visit a building, an historic building, how many have you visited without electricity, without power? None, I don't think. However, how many have you visited with this solving these architect barriers? Well, power is very simple, it's basic, and then we find these problems. Well, it is the same with power or with traffic. Yes, we are used to enjoy heritage with the traffic. But really, all this signposting has an effect, the pavement, everything. Just to finish, the most important is to be flexible, as Junca says. Each case is different. We cannot generalize, and we cannot just say that because it is heritage we cannot touch it. Each case is unique. We have to look for a point of a balanced point, which is always different for each case. And this is what is fascinating from our profession. Just two more cases. Well, sometimes we cannot find the perfect well, that was a big effort what they did here in Avila. Another example, when entering to the El Escorial monastery, there is a clear difference between the colors and materials for the entrance. They try to have a minimal contact in order to have the perception of the whole thing. Well, just to conclude, the question, are there compatible accessibility and heritage? Well, I think we have already given a response. If you have some doubts, I will read Saint Therese. The extremes are not good, not even in virtue. Thank you very much.
And now we are going to talk about historical heritage and accessibility in Italy. And we have here Isabella Tiziana Stefan, who works as at the studies company. She's an architect. She has been an architect since 1982. She's an expert on ergonomy and design for all. In 1994, she participated in the works of the Italian Institute of Design for Disability, which now is called Design for All Italy, and she's a president. She has represented Italy in the European Network of Design for All. She's a professor at the Polytechnical Institute and the Catholic University of Milan. She is part of the European Network for Accessibility. She's a co-founder of INAT. She's a member of the Italian Association of Ergonomy. She's a member of the Working Group on Accessibility in Museums of the International Committee of Museums. She published a book in 2012, Design for All, Methods, Tools, and Applications. Thank you.
The presence of architectural barriers characterizes virtually all architecture and landscapes that make up the world's historical and cultural heritage. Italy, like Spain, has a great number of heritage sites, and not only buildings, but entire ancient cities and archaeological sites of great significance. The issues of accessibility and usability must be faced within each unique context, taking into account the special characteristics and qualities of the historical, cultural, and natural landscape. Often, walled towns appear virtually inaccessible due to the geological or topographical conditions. Such examples present difficulties when aiming to achieve complete accessibility in and around sites. In many Italian historical centers, complete accessibility cannot be achieved without a total distortion of the surrounding historical context. In many historical architectures, it is not possible to guarantee accessibility for technical, architectural, and conservation reasons. A more realistic goal in many cases is to ensure everyone enjoys a concrete visitability in a way that makes the experience interesting, attractive, and meaningful for all. Some design difficulties are of a very technical nature and related to the specific characteristics of the area. For example, long distances to walk, steep gradients, uneven floor, etc. Such problems are complicated by the diverse characteristics of different users that can impact on levels of usability and cultural understanding possible in highly individual ways. In this case, the overcoming of a difference in level at urban scale is being obtained with scenographic solutions that, however, not allow everybody to completely use and enjoy the sites. Oh, sorry. Okay. This is a wooden pathways, and the realization of a ramp here is articulated and well included in existing rural environment and allows the overcoming of the difference in level as well as the accessibility of the site. In this other case, in Urbino, a particular situation of a morphology and historic urban context, the barrier of distance and the subsequent fatigue has been reduced with an escalator that crosses the hill in stark contrast with the surrounding environment. It can be considered as a landmark since it characterizes the space and can be recognized from afar. In Italy, we have the guidelines for overcoming architectural barriers in cultural heritage sites, and also the manifesto, the poster of accessible culture for all. Among the stated objectives, we find to offer a fulfilling cultural experience for any person. When facing objective physical barriers, it is desirable to apply alternative and creative solutions and means of transport that enable users to easily move. We have a new location of the Omero Museum in Ancona, here in the center of Italy, is on one side of the pentagonal Mole Van Vitelliana. This place hosts a museum for the blinds, who uses the auditory perception for orientation a lot. As the rooms are quite big and high, while mounting the exhibition, it was necessary to take care of the acoustics in order to limit the echo effect and sound interferences. This is a picture from the old Omero Museum for the Blinds in Ancona to show the road provided with special education aids, information in Braille and black, and a walking assistant technology. The signal is transmitted by a copper wire, the low tension conductor, located under a yellow sticky stripe along the road. This emits a very low sound, a vibration that can be felt through the handle of a special cane. Indoor localization systems are used to guide people and define the position of objects. Nowadays, there are many with different technologies, different level of configuration, precision, reliability, such as global position system, localization system by infrared rays, localization system by ultrasounds, localization system by radio frequency, by computer visions, etc. According to a research from the Università Politecnica of the Marche region, we can say that the best solutions for blind guide indoor system with the best accuracy are infrared rays, ultrasounds, and computer vision. RF technology is a good wireless solution. The Cisa-Monet system, secure and safe mobility network at the Museo dell'Opera in Parma works with a special cane, a smartphone, an earphone, and methacrylate elements under which to put the microchips. The phone is connected to the cane via Bluetooth technology, accepts the information through contact of the cane, and gives information about the work exposed through the earphones. This technology has some weak points, actually. Low flexibility of changing the route, interferences if marks are too close, hands too busy to explore the work of art. But several examples of successful interventions in Italy are presented with a special focus on interpretative museums aimed at improving the use and enjoyment of historical heritage sites by everyone, including people with sensory disabilities and children. In this area, much is being done with the help of modern technology. It is also possible sometimes to manipulate and to replicate a piece of work in special educational workshops. It is important to offer compensatory measures such as interpretation areas, multimedia, live video streaming, publications, three-dimensional models, etc. These enable visitors also in an indirect way to connect with at least the most significant heritage sites. Accessibility is also the possibility to explore the environment and to enjoy the experience. In Italian museums, guided tours are more and more widely used, as well as audio guides, the possibility to touch the archaeological finds, be of three-dimensional maps of the buildings, of the rooms, of the works. A tourist guide for Florence has been produced that allows people with motor and visual difficulties to visit the town and overcome the various obstacles. For each one of the 4 pathways that are signaled, the guides show accessibility, comfort, communicativeness, and safety of use. For example, fountains and sculptures located on the edge of the street are indicated as elements that can be touched and therefore are useful for the orientation. Here we are in Rome, excavation area. Bi-dimensional and three-dimensional maps are quite good integrations of the orientation system, but it should be better to protect them from bad atmospheric conditions and vandalism. Another example in Rome, Portico di Ottavia, the gallery of Ottavia in Rome, the restoration of the site was done in different ways in order to overcome the difference in levels. Through an archaeological path that goes under the Teatro di Marcello on one side and on the opposite side through an accessible footbridge. This path is marked by a special texture and material. Its edge is marked by the curve of the original Roman bricks. The ramp that goes down to the excavation area as a guideline for the orientation of blinds. It's being realized using the local material, basalt, in different ways. Roma, again, Mercati di Traiano, practicability and accessibility of the site has been improved through walkways, ramps, parapets, and all-pressure lift, 2 lifting platforms. Problem with the ancient regular Roman floor still remains, though. But the external lift is made of brickwork, similar to the old Roman walls. It is easy to recognize the modern intervention, also because bricks have a different size from the old ones. Here, the Colosseum. Hundreds of tourists use the 2 lifts that connect the ground floor to the first floor and which are invisible from the outside. Again, compatibility within accessibility and old historical buildings. Because of the heritage context, a modern and transparent solution has been preferred. In this case, the lifts are made of steel and glass. Here we are in Brescia, in the north of Italy, and walkways are on the ancient Roman Cardo. Another example in the south of Italy, Matera, The raised museum route fully enables access to everybody and a safe view of the finds. Here in Milano, the museum route of the 50s to the Pietà Rondanini does not allow an access for all to the statue due to the differences in height. Upon request, an alternative pathway for people with motor difficulties can be used. And Venice, to finish with. Despite the numerous laws and the requests from the population, the Constitution Bridge of Venice, the architect is Spanish, sorry, it is not accessible for people in wheelchair. It is uncomfortable and not very safe for people with luggage, mother with prams, and it is slippery when wet. To solve partially this problem, a cable car has been built, but it is low and too small and an element that upsets the original project. But in spite of this extremely controversial example, the municipality of Venice is a virtuous administration. The city has in fact committed itself through the IBA office and the City for All office to guarantee to citizens and visitors the most useful information in order to use in the best way the services for disabled people and to disseminate the facilities and interventions that have been implemented in order to improve urban accessibility. The map of the city of Venice pinpoints accessible places and pathways, both through facilitated bridges or stair lift and through ferries. Here a competition shown for the planning and design of a ramp to be built on the bridge. The winning project of the competition for the elimination of architectural barriers enables an easier crossing of the channel. The new policy of the public administration favors accessible transport through ferries instead of intervening on the bridges and denaturalize the architecture, thanks to the navigation public transport service and to the work carried out by the municipal administration during the years. Nearly 70% of the surface area of the historic city center is now accessible to persons with motor disabilities. There is also dedicated transport for users in wheelchair with pantograph platforms for approaching the dock. And modular elements easily positioned allow an easy passage thanks to the facilitated step system. There are many examples in the city of interventions done to improve accessibility of bridges with many styles and formal solutions that are different from one another. Podotactile elements have been put on the floor in order to improve the orientation of people with visual impairments and parapets for a better safety. For this bridge, the local administration has decided to put 2 modern lifts on the side of the ramps. During important renovation works or extraordinary repairs in important areas of the city, scaffoldings and accessible alternative paths are provided. To conclude with, the city of Venice is a particularly interesting case study, a veritable open-air museum. Yes, because the accessibility project does not stop inside a single building, but embraces a broader vision, offering an integrated heritage experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
We continue with the speech how to improve the access to the Acropolis of Athens, benefits for tourism and for the quality of life. speaker will be Katerina Papamichail from Greece. She's an architect and expertise counselor about the built environment. She works as researcher in up to February 2012. She coordinates the Department of Architecture and Housing from the University of Greece. She worked for the organizing committee of the Olympic Games of Athens in 2004. She's responsible of combined accessibility. She was member of the team in charge of coordinating accessibility in public buildings. During the last year, she has been participating in several European projects about the accessibility in the built environment. In November 2012, she worked as expert about European regulations and accessibility regulation for the built environment. She's co-author for the accessibility regulation in Greece. Her last publishing is about accessible issues, good practices in accessible tourism. Katharina is an associate member from INAT and from the Technic Chamber of Greece. I give you the floor, Catherine.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Ante for this invitation. I'm really very honored to be here and share the Athens experience with you. The city of Athens has made great improvements. The city of Athens has made great improvements to the accessibility of its historic cultural center in the past years, and this development was largely prompted by the unique opportunity and the need to make the city accessible for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2004. Today, looking at TripAdvisor, you will see Athens presented as the Traveler's Choice Destination Winner 2013. They write, once known for smog, traffic and tacky architecture, Athens is a city reformed thanks to fortunes brought by the 2004 Summer Olympics. Spotless parks and streets, an ultra-modern subway, new freeways and all signs in perfect English make the city easily negotiable. Here are some of the figures. 11.3 million visitors came to Greece in 2012. Heritage sites are some of the main attractions. Last year, 1.5 million tourists visited the Acropolis monument. The new Acropolis Museum, just below the Acropolis itself, is the third most popular museum in the world. The historical center of the city has been transformed with accessibility at the center of the improvements. I will be focusing on the following points. Creating public spaces and pedestrian routes that connect the historical sites, access to the World Heritage Site of Acropolis and other monuments, the new Acropolis Museum, which is a centerpiece for tourists and citizens, and finally the public transport system that was greatly improved and developed. Essentially, the new pedestrian route is the unifying element which joins the monuments in the historical center, while the accessible public transport system with its various transport modes connects and allows access to the center from the outer areas of the city. The Great Walkway was the major project completed in 2004, which really transformed the historical center of Athens. Named the unification of the archaeological sites, The pedestrian route consists of 5 kilometers of walkways, enhancing accessibility for all. The new pedestrian route is roughly within the purple line shown in this map of the central Athens. The renovation of the streets did not only aim at creating a simple pedestrian way by removing cars, but created a magnet of recreation. The continuous walking route links all the significant cultural and archaeological landmarks of Athens, including the Acropolis. The removal of roads and motor vehicles and the creation of the pedestrian route was a very radical solution for the center of Athens, which had been choked by motor traffic for generations. This was a great improvement for general access and for the quality of life of the citizens. New public areas and common spaces with a new look, new squares, landmarks and places for stopping and meeting, talking and enjoying the surroundings. A continuous tactile route made of marble is incorporated in the entire walkway. Visitors can move freely without crossing traffic between the main heritage sites and the central metro stations. The walkway is a favorite menu for families with small children and wheelchair users who enjoy the quiet and pleasant surroundings. Improved access has brought other benefits, allowing small enterprises and new activities, giving the opportunity for people to enjoy the city in new ways and with new possibilities for businesses and tourism. Today, people enjoy bike rides, children can play safely, and pedestrians can walk through the old neighborhoods around the Acropolis. It is totally worth it, as these tourists say on the website of Athens by Bike. Guided cycling tours are one of the businesses which have appeared. Here we see again a comment from visitors on TripAdvisor. Great fun in cycling Athens. You would never have heard this just a few years ago. Another new business is the fun bike for 2 or more cyclists and passengers, and many cafes and restaurants can be found along the whole way. 2 buses reach only to the edge of the walking route, and horse-drawn carriages are available for tourists to enjoy their visit in their preferred way. Along the pedestrian route, the old Tiseo outdoor cinema is now accessible and even more attractive. There is no noise for passing traffic, and it has the most stunning nighttime view of the Acropolis. CNN has declared it the greatest outdoor cinema in the world. The pedestrian route also gives access to the ancient Roman Herodian Theatre, which is located on the southwest slope of the Acropolis of Athens and has a capacity of 5,000 people. It is the main venue of the Athens Festival, which runs from May to October each year, featuring a variety of Greek as well as international performances. Before the pedestrian route was created, the police had to stop the traffic on the surrounding streets before every performance. Wooden ramps and a platform area have been added at one side of the terraced rows of sitting, making the ancient theatre accessible for wheelchair users. A special platform is placed over the existing sitting in the first row above the floor for 8 wheelchair users and accompanying persons. In addition, 13 seats are reserved for people with other disabilities. For decades, the Acropolis, the symbol of Greek civilization and the UNESCO World Heritage Site, was not accessible for people with mobility impairments. Access was difficult and even dangerous in wet, slippery conditions. A wheelchair user could only be carried to the top by 4 strong friends. Until this century, the issue of access has hardly even discussed, being considered too outrageous given the status of the monument. Remarkably, the Greek state made a promise to make the Acropolis accessible for all, when in 1997 it submitted its bid to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games. There was no approved plan at that time, but one had to be made. Achieving access here was no less than making the impossible possible. Visitors with walking difficulties and wheelchair users can now ascend the Acropolis by a special route on the north side of the rock. A smooth path leads to the first stage where there's a platform lift. From the top of this lift, a lift cage takes the visitor directly to the top, ascending the outer fortification wall. The lift was approved as a temporary solution in 2004 to overcome any objections there may have been, but today it remains and serves many visitors. It is also available for parents with pushchairs and people with walking difficulties. The elevator system is attached to part of the wall that was constructed during the decades between the two world wars and doesn't touch the ancient wall next to it. The ascent takes about 50 seconds, and visitors get off near the 5th century BC Erechtheion temple. The paths that lead around the top have been smoothed and a special surface has been added, but most wheelchair users require some assistance to get around the side. Now, the new Acropolis Museum is located below the Acropolis on the Great Walkway. It is a landmark for Athens and is the third most popular in the world. Designed by the Swiss architect Bernard Tschumi and opened in 2009, the new museum is an example of design which respects the historical legacy of the city. This view from the air shows the Acropolis with the Parthenon and the old museum and the new museum in the foreground. The new museum had to fit into a very small plot among other buildings and have a direct view to the Acropolis. When the site was being prepared for the foundations, layers of previous civilizations were found beneath the streets and buildings. A design and engineering solution was found by placing the building higher up on 43 columns so that the excavations could be protected and displayed. Visitors can now see a working excavation site under the museum. Glass floors have been installed to allow the excavations to be viewed, also while walking through the museum. The museum is fully accessible for wheelchair users. Wheelchairs are also available free of charge at the museum entrance for those with walking difficulties, and there are also parking spaces for visitors with disabilities. The upper gallery has a direct view to the Acropolis and the Parthenon itself. The restaurant and cafeteria, also accessible, have become popular not only for tourists, but as a meeting place for the Athenians. The historical center works as a pedestrian environment because the public transport system connects easily and in many places to the Great Walkway. All the different means of public transport, metro, train, tram and bus, are wheelchair accessible. The tram and metro came into operation before the Olympic Games and have reduced motor traffic by 400,000 journeys per day. I will present very briefly the metro and the railway because these two transport systems have really brought a big change to the everyday life of the city. This map shows the Athens metro and rail networks. The railways converge into the historical center. Athens metro is accessible for all. Every station has lifts and level or ramped access points, and escalators are provided at all stations. Ticket machines and ticket counters at a low height suitable for wheelchair users. That platforms are provided with tactile paving and warning tiles at the platform edge. On every platform there is level access to the train, and stop announcements are in Greek and English for tourists. The Athens metro stations have a unique style or character, and specially commissioned works of art are a feature in every station. The artworks and decoration contribute to overall accessibility by adding a sense of place and helping orientation. The archaeological remains that were found during the construction works have been displayed in the stations, making the Athens Metro a museum of its own right. And finally, upgrading the old railway station was part of the whole project. The rail passenger line that connects the port of Piraeus with the northern suburb of Kephysia passing through the center of Athens is the second oldest underground railway in the world after London. Today, following the renovations of the 2004 Olympics, the railway line is an example of good practice in accessibility in Europe. All the stations have a unique character, and platforms and their approaches are now fully accessible for all. Access improvements include tactile routes with color contrast on all platforms and approaches, and tactile markings at the platform edge. Lifts were added where necessary, and escalators were installed. Also, the surrounding pavements and access routes were brought up to standard to allow access to all stations. So, coming to the conclusions. What is the conclusion? What do we learn by the Athens experience? Better access has brought people back to the city, which has restored part of the original character of ancient Athens, including all social groups, developing opportunities for new businesses, making the city a safe, comfortable, attractive and enjoyable place for tourism experiences. Let me give a final word to Jan Gehl, the Danish urban planner who has championed the concept of cities for people as the essential goal for sustainable cities. When he visited Athens in 2012, he was impressed by this project and encouraged the city to go even further, to make people visible in all the other areas of the city, which of course today still need radical solutions. Thank you very much.
The roundtable is about to finish with its last speech on accessibility in historical cities, new ways to cultural heritage in Viborg, Denmark. It will be presented by Carl Johan Jæger Jensen, who is a topographist since 1997. He has worked for the region of Viborg or in his own city. She has been planning agent for landscape and nature, has been head of the Office for Landscapes and Nature in the region. He has been head of the Office for Landscape in his city. Thank you. And after that, immediately after the speech, we will have a few minutes for a short session of questions and answers. Thank you.
I would like to present this project standing up, if you don't mind. I had my luggage is unfortunately left in Amsterdam, and so is my presentation. So I have to look at the screen up there, and I'll have to improvise. I hope you'll excuse me all. First of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to join this Congress. I think it is so very inspiring to see the many ways that all of you are working with accessibility. I'll bring home a lot that we can use in our work. I also want to thank you for have the possibility to give you a brief information on our project in Viborg. I'll start to say I'm head of planning office in the municipality in Viborg, and I am in no way an expert on accessibility. But in our work, of course, we to improve the accessibility is, of course, a big part of it. This project I'll tell you about is one of many ways, many different ways we in the municipality in Viborg work with improving accessibility. Of course, we work with accessibility in our buildings, in our public buildings, in our streets, in our cities, and also in different areas of nature. This project is a partnership where the municipalities in Viborg is one part, and the other parts are different foundations. The first, Realdania, is a foundation working with development of cities. The Vivica Foundation and the Danish Disability Foundation are organizations working with accessibility and different aspects of disability. The Labour Market Holiday Fund work with different aspects on tourism, and then we, the municipality of Viborg, is of course also a part. We always in the municipality seeks external fundings. Of course, we do that because, as you all know, public funds are cut down all the time, and we have to find alternatives. This is, of course, one of the reasons why we do it. But the other reason, which is just as important, is that working with funds and different organizations, we are given new inspiration. We have new knowledge, and we have participation of different interests. I think it's an important thing for us to have this new views on our projects. A little about Viborg. Viborg is located in the middle of Jutland on a range of steep hills. Well, as some of you might know, Denmark is a very flat country, so you might not find the hills very steep, but in the Danish matter they are. The city is dated back to 900, founded in the Viking Age. It is an episcopal residence in the Middle Age called Jerusalem of the North. The pilgrims from all the Nordic countries used to gather in Viborg before they started their journey mainly to Santiago de Compostela. We have in the municipality merely 100,000 inhabitants and merely 40,000 inhabitants in the city. In the region or so, we have 3 million visitors a year and 1.3 million tourists a year. Many of our tourists in Viborg municipality are 50 plus of age. A large part of these come to Viborg because of the history, the cultural heritage, and they are, of course, interested in this part of the city. Because of that, in this project, we wanted to concentrate on the old part of the town. We want to concentrate on improving the accessibility on the old part of the town in this project. The street structure and some of the stone houses can be dated to the Middle Ages. Unfortunately, not many of the houses, because almost the whole city was burnt down in 1726. A lot of most of the buildings are from after that year, but the structure of the city remains. In the Middle Ages, Viborg had about 2,000 inhabitants and 14 churches. Most of these were cancelled and removed after the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century. One of the places the Reformation in Denmark started was in Viborg. This gave place to new buildings and squares, of course. From the period afterwards and from the growth following the industrialization from the 18th and 19th century, you can see many Baroque and Classicist building in the city. Yeah, just some pictures from the town. The first picture is actually the shopping street in the pedestrian area, and they have just been renewed with new accessible pavements. This is not a part of this project, but of course it's coherent with it. Actually, the new streets are officially opened today. Yes, and some other pictures from the city, some of the steep hills and some of the cobbled streets as well. We started this project to form a vision with the different foundations. The first part was to improve the accessibility for all to sites and public spaces in the historical city. One of the challenges, as I said, the steep rises of the streets. Another part of the vision is to improve the continuous experience of the city and to connect the commercial activities in the historical with the historical and cultural attractions. And of course, by this, to create business development through the cultural heritage. I want to say that accessibility to all sites and public spaces, we say. As a matter of fact, it's not only to the monuments and to the cathedral and to the churches. I think it's impossible to have the accessibility to all the small rooms and places, the more hidden and secret spaces in the towns and the cities. I think it's a big part of when you walk around and want to enjoy the city. We want to use innovative solutions for both physical measures and communications in order to make the historical values of the city accessible to all. And this without damaging the authenticity. And to realize the project within a strong local network and collaboration. This is an important part too. I must say we haven't started to make the physical part of the project yet. We started the project in 2011, and some of you might think it's a very long time to make this project, but it's due to all the work with the local network and the collaboration, I think. But I think it's an important part. A little about the activities and process. We started with forming this vision and made a contest, design contest, which led to a decision on a general contractor. And together with the partnership, the general contractor is to examine and demonstrate new physical solutions that will bring accessibility to all with or without disabilities, to the historical environment without damaging this in respect of the architecture and the heritage. From the start, we wanted to have to work with the communication at the same time, but due to different difficulties, we had to make a new decision. And now a contest concerning communication is held parallel to the development of the physical measurements. So now we are developing the project, and we hope to start implementation and communication next year. The project connects the most important sites and some of the smaller places in the city, streets, squares, green urban spaces in the historical city. And the new accessible sites are interwoven with already accessible routes and streets in the city, the pedestrian routes and so on. And this creating a new coherent network of accessibility. Our project is made through discrete and almost invisible solution. Some critics say, but what are you doing? It's invisible. Most of what you are doing, it's invisible. Why spend so many money on something that is invisible? And my answer is, okay, then I think it's a success, because we do it in respect for the architecture in the existing city. So we use already known materials, existing materials in the cityscape, granite as paving slabs, guiding lines, cobblestones, gravel, etc. To the right you have one of one example. Communication, well, we didn't get that far yet, but I'm sure we will. The ambition is to communicate accessible, of course, to communicate the accessibility in an accessible way, to communicate the heritage in an accessible way, digitally as well as physically. As I told you, a contest is being held parallel to the development of the project. And we want to use already existing communication about the city from the museum, the tourist office, etc., as long as we can. Maybe we'll have to make new channels for communication, but I think it is important to use the already existing channels too. Collaboration, as I told you, it's realized the project within a strong local network, and collaboration between the municipality, tourist office of course, the trading organizations, museums, several organizations representing youth, elderly people, people with handicaps, etc., and etc. I don't know if time is running out, but I would like to show you a short. Okay, I have a short movie I would like to show you, and I think it's about 4 minutes, so that would be perfect, I think.
Bueno, pues los 4 minutos que le hemos dado.
I want to thank all the speakers because of the quality of their speech and because of their effort to adapt to the time we had for this round table. Because sadly we have started 17 minutes in delayed. We have just a few minutes maybe for some questions, if you have some question related to the issues we have been talking. I'm sorry, I cannot see anything because of the light. Good morning, I'm Alfonso J. I'm a civil urban architect. I'm part of the DIPA, the Aggregation of Architects to Defend the Historical Heritage, and I am the director of Organismo Sensible. I don't know if you had if you could see my communication of the 26, in which I show something we did in Barcelona opposite to what we have seen in Viborg. Well, here, how the Acropolis was intervened here in Spain would be just impossible. Just remember the intervention in Grasse, in Sagunto. It has to be break down. The heritage here in Spain is more a kind of artwork from a museum, impossible to touch. It's not something alive. This is one of our problems. Another problem we have is, from the point of view of architects, is how to solve the problem of the mobility dysfunction. In the case of Viborg, a city, in the space speculation wasn't as important as the one we have in Spain, maybe that allows you this kind of solutions. But here in Spain, space is gold, and here is impossible in terms of economic. And also, as a small from ACS, I would like just to support all the effort that the ACS Foundation is doing. Thank you very much. Someone from the table? Well, it wasn't really a question. It was just a comment affecting some of the issues on behalf of the ACH Foundation. I thank you for your comment. Katerina, you can answer if you want to.
The intervention to Acropolis. In Greece, we couldn't really imagine that we could make this Acropolis accessible. But this big promise was given for the Olympic Games, and that was the very big chance for the historical center, as I said. Everything that was done there, because it was because of the pressure of the Olympics and Paralympics, and there were many discussions. There have been many discussions about this elevator, which was approved, as I said, as a temporary solution. But for me, even, I don't know if it looks beautiful or if it doesn't look beautiful. It's in a part of Acropolis that you can't really see it from many areas, but the scope, the goal of the accessibility is above everything else. I don't think it destroys the monument. The monument has its own status. The monument is what it is, but the purpose of making it accessible and give this opportunity to everybody is something that is a treasure, and I believe it's worth the trouble, even if it's not the best, the most beautiful solution.
¿Alguna intervención más? ¿Alguna pregunta concreta?
Any other question? Well, if there are no more questions, oh, sorry. Is there someone behind the camera? Good morning. I am also an architect. I have a visual impairment. And talking about heritage, we talk about how to solve the physical accessibility, but I haven't heard much about sensorial or impairments, visual impairments, or criteria of localization. In terms of heritage, this is in a second. There are much more criteria for the future, because I had the opportunity of meeting Francisco Renor. We were talking about the works done in order to make accessible the Escorial monastery, but it's always about this mobility, accessibility for people with reduced mobility. But in terms of sensorial accessibility, tactile processes, and orientation of the itineraries, I think I haven't heard much about this, talking about heritage above all. Do you want to say something else?
In relation to this question, the problem of accessibility from the physical point of view traditionally has been paramount traditionally.